In this segment, we're going to focus on the key tactics that you can use for success. And earlier in the course, we talked about 3 key tactics. Number 1, getting to know the other side. Second, understanding your power. And finally, using psychological tools and avoiding psychological traps. Getting to know the other side is something that is very useful in any negotiation. In this particular negotiation, you may have picked a friend as a counterpart for the negotiation, in which case you could probably skip this step since you already know that person. But if you picked somebody who you didn't know before, then it always makes sense in any negotiation, dispute resolution or deal making, to spend some time getting to know the other side before you start talking about the actual details of the negotiation. As we discussed earlier, this is more difficult in some cultures than in others, but it's a very worthwhile exercise. Okay, second piece of this is understanding your power. And as we discussed in the course, there are a couple of elements of power. One element is the ability to ask questions and to listen carefully to the answers. And so in this case, in this negotiation, did you ask questions? And did you listen carefully and gather information? Because in a general sense, information is what gives you power in a negotiation. It's not talking, it's not trying to persuade the other side, it's listening carefully and gathering that information. For example, if you were Pat in this case, did you ask Tracy about the uncle? What's the name of your uncle? How old is your uncle? How long has your uncle been in the house? Why is the uncle selling? If you ask this type of question, then you can quickly put together a picture showing old person, bad health, rundown house, needs to sell. And that's going to be very useful information in your negotiation, especially when you move to the next aspect of power, and perhaps the most important aspect, and that's your BATNA strategy. Because the piece of information that specifically gives you power relates to BATNA. And so in this case, first of all, were you able to find out what their BATNA was and how powerful they are? And then second, once you find their BATNA, were you able to weaken their power? So, for example, let's say you're Tracy in this negotiation, and you learn that there's a company involved, and that if the company doesn't buy your property, they're going to buy another piece of property on Main Street for $265,000. Now, think of how you can play with that information to weaken their power. If you're Tracy, you're going to say to Pat, now, let me see if I have this straight. You're a large multinational company. You're coming into our little community. And the very first thing you do to build your corporate headquarters is buy a beautiful, well-maintained house on Main Street in a residential area, and you're going to flatten that house and cover the lot with asphalt and turn it into a parking lot. Can you imagine how outraged the people in this community are going to be? There are going to be protests. You're going to lose any goodwill right off the bat. It's going to destroy your business opportunities. That's how you play with their sense of their BATNA. That's how you play with their power, how you weaken their power. And then the final piece of BATNA strategy is improving your own power. So in this case, as we discussed earlier, the seller, the uncle, really has an awful BATNA. We have an elderly man, bad health, rundown house, no other buyers. So what you should do to improve your BATNA is obviously find other buyers. So number one, if I were the uncle or if I were Tracy, I'd start by touching up the house. I'd buy some cans of paint and paint the house, do it myself if I had to try to make the house look better. Number two, I would actively search for other buyers. It sounds like the owner, the seller, has been very relaxed about finding other buyers. So I would start by putting an ad in the paper or elsewhere saying the home is for sale by owner, or taking it a step further, obviously, hiring a broker who could generate interest in the house and bring in other buyers, which then improves my power and strengthens my BATNA. So that's your power strategy. That's specifically your BATNA strategy in this negotiation.